Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I had owned my new home for 6 months and had loved the peace and quiet. That peace was shattered the day I brought home what I lovingly called the Silver Bullet, my 1976 Airstream trailer. I had no idea my new hobby would lead to an all-out war with the queen of the neighborhood, our HOA president. Let me back up and give you some context. I'm a freelance architect in my mid-30s, recently divorced, and I bought this house specifically because it came with something unique, an adjacent, undeveloped half-acre lot. My dream was to eventually design and build a small, eco-friendly guest house and a large workshop on that lot, but for now it was just a patch of grass and trees, which was perfect for me since I value my privacy and quiet. The property has a really interesting layout that would become crucial to this whole story. My house sits in a regular suburban development, but the extra lot is what's called a flag lot. This means the main chunk of land is set back from the road, and there's a long, narrow strip of land that connects it to the main street. Think of it like a flag on a pole. The pole is the access road, and the flag is the lot itself. This access road is completely part of my deeded property, though it just looked like a gravel path that previous neighbors had been using as a walking shortcut to get to a nearby park. The HOA had recently gotten new management, and the new president was this woman in her late 50s who clearly had way too much time on her hands. She had appointed herself as the neighborhood enforcer and would patrol around in her golf cart with a clipboard looking for violations. You know the type. The kind of person who measures your grass with a ruler to make sure it's not too long. So anyway, I found this beautiful vintage Airstream trailer online. It was a passion project that I planned to completely renovate once I built my workshop. Since the workshop wasn't built yet, I parked the Airstream on my gravel access road, tucked away next to the empty lot. It was completely on my own property, not blocking any public street or sidewalk, and you could barely even see it from the main road. Within 24 hours of parking it, I found a large neon orange sticker slapped right on the Airstream's window. It was an HOA violation notice that cited rules against storing RVs, trailers, and what they called derelict vehicles. The notice demanded immediate removal of the trailer and threatened a $100 per day fine starting immediately. I figured this was just a simple misunderstanding. I mean, the trailer was clearly on my private property, so I sent a polite message to the HOA explaining that the trailer was on my private access road, not on common property. I even included a digital copy of my property survey map with the property lines clearly highlighted in bright yellow. The response I got back was swift, dismissive, and copied to the entire HOA board. The president wrote that the covenants applied to all properties within the development, that my gravel path was not an approved driveway surface, and that my trailer was an eyesore in violation of community standards. She informed me that the fines had already started and that I had 48 hours to move it, or they would have it towed at my expense. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This woman was basically telling me I couldn't park something on my own property. I decided I needed to handle this face-to-face at the next monthly HOA meeting. I printed out large copies of my deed, the title for the property, and the official county survey map. I was confident that once I showed them the actual legal documents, this whole mess would be cleared up. Boy, was I wrong about that. At the meeting, the president refused to let me speak at first. She said the agenda was already set and that property disputes needed to be handled through proper channels. When I finally got the floor and tried to present my documents, she waved her hand dismissively and told the room that they didn't need to see my fake maps. She painted me as a difficult newcomer who was trying to find loopholes to turn the neighborhood into a trailer park. I tried to interrupt and explain that these weren't fake maps. They were official county documents, but she just kept talking over me. She went on about maintaining community standards and how important it was to preserve property values. The board members, who were clearly loyal to her, voted to uphold the fines and authorize the towing of my trailer. I walked out of that meeting absolutely furious. I had tried to be reasonable. I had tried to show them the legal documents, and they had basically told me to go pound sand. At that point, I knew my polite approach wasn't going to work. It was time to consult a professional. 2 days later, I was working from home when my neighbor called to tell me there was a heavy-duty tow truck hooking up my Airstream. I ran outside and confronted the driver, who showed me a work order from the HOA. I immediately called the police to report attempted vehicle theft from my private property. The police response was interesting. When the officers arrived, I calmly presented my ownership documents and property survey. They reviewed the paperwork carefully, confirmed that the Airstream was definitely on private land, and instructed the tow truck driver to unhook my trailer and leave. The driver was absolutely furious at the HOA for what he called a bogus and illegal call. The HOA president had arrived to watch what she probably thought would be her victory, but instead she found herself arguing with the police officers. I watched from my driveway as one of the officers cautioned her about filing false reports. Seeing her storm off in a huff was satisfying, but I knew this wasn't over. She had been publicly embarrassed, and now it was personal. I knew then and there that I had to stop playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. The next morning, I called a property lawyer who came highly recommended. When I explained the situation and showed him all my documents, he actually started laughing. He told me enthusiastically that I was completely in the right and that the HOA actions constituted harassment. He said they had absolutely no legal authority over my private access road and that their attempts to fine me and tow my property were potentially actionable. But here's where the story gets really good. My lawyer suggested that instead of just fighting this defensively, maybe it was time to make it crystal clear to everyone exactly where my property lines were. He recommended I hire a professional surveying company to come out and mark the exact boundaries of my lot and access road. Within a week, I had a team of surveyors out there marking every inch of my property with brightly colored flags and wooden stakes. This created quite a visual stir in the neighborhood. People kept stopping by to ask what was going on, and I just told them I was having my property lines professionally marked for a future project. But I wasn't done. Following those survey lines exactly, I hired a contractor to install a 6-foot-tall, commercial-grade chain-link fence. The fence completely enclosed my empty lot and ran the entire length of my access road right up to the street. This immediately cut off the walking shortcut that neighbors had been using for years to get to the park. At the mouth of my access road, I had a heavy-duty automatic gate installed with a keypad entry system. Along the fence, I placed large, professionally printed signs every 20 feet that read, "Private property. Access by permission only. No trespassing. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. This is not HOA common area." Little did I know, my fence was about to cause a much bigger problem for the HOA than I had anticipated. It turned out that the HOA contracted landscaping company had been using my access road for years to get their large riding mowers and equipment to the park and other common areas they were required to maintain. With my gate now locked and my property clearly marked as private, they had no easy access to do their job. The neighborhood descended into mild chaos pretty quickly. The landscaping crew couldn't get their equipment to the main park, which started to look overgrown within a couple of weeks. Angry neighbors began complaining to the HOA about their walking shortcut being gone and about what they called my ugly fence. The HOA was getting hit from all sides. That's when the HOA lawyer sent me a cease and desist demand regarding my fence. They claimed I was interfering with established easements and community access rights. My lawyer's response was absolutely beautiful. He sent back a single, devastating letter that included copies of my deed, title, and the new professional survey, along with an invoice for my legal fees and an itemized bill for the cost of the fence and gate, which he presented as security measures necessary due to HOA-led harassment and attempted theft. The letter also included a formal notice of harassment and a clear threat of a significant lawsuit if the HOA or any of its agents contacted me in any way other than through their legal counsel. My lawyer made it very clear that any further interference with my property rights would result in immediate legal action. Faced with the potential of a major lawsuit and clear proof of their error, the other board members finally started to turn on their president. The neighbors were angry about the park maintenance issues and the loss of their shortcut. The legal bills were adding up, and the HOA insurance company was starting to ask uncomfortable questions about liability. An emergency HOA meeting was called, not by the board, but by the homeowners themselves. This time, they demanded to see my property documents. When they reviewed the actual legal paperwork, they finally realized that their president's personal vendetta had exposed the entire association to massive legal and financial liability. The meeting was apparently pretty brutal. Multiple neighbors stood up and criticized the president's handling of the situation. They pointed out that she had ignored clear legal documents, authorized an illegal towing attempt, and caused the current maintenance crisis with the park. The board members who had previously supported her started distancing themselves quickly. By the end of that meeting, she had been removed from her position as president by a unanimous vote of the homeowners. The new board was forced to use HOA funds to pay my legal bills and reimburse me for the fencing costs. They also issued a formal written apology acknowledging that my property was private and that the HOA had no authority over it. But the story gets even better. In a show of good faith, and to prove that I had never been the problem, I offered to grant the landscaping company access to my road for a nominal fee of $1 per year. This would allow them to maintain the park and common areas properly. The only conditions were that the HOA had to stick to their formal apology and guarantee that no board member would ever contact me directly about property matters again. They agreed immediately. The landscaping company was thrilled to have their access back. The park got properly maintained again, and the neighbors realized that I had been reasonable all along. The former president, however, was not happy about any of these developments. Over the next few months, she made a few attempts to cause trouble for me. She tried to get the county code enforcement involved, claiming my fence violated setback requirements. When they came out to investigate, they found that my fence was perfectly legal and properly permitted. She tried to rally some neighbors to petition against my gate, but nobody wanted to sign after they learned the full story of what had happened. The final nail in the coffin came when she attempted to file a complaint with the state about my business operations, claiming I was running an illegal automotive repair shop because I was working on my airstream. The investigator who came out took one look at my property, saw that I was simply doing hobby restoration work on my own private land, and told her to stop filing frivolous complaints or face penalties for abuse of the system. After that last failed attempt, she finally gave up. She sold her house and moved away less than 6 months later. Apparently, she didn't like the direction the community was heading and couldn't stand living near someone who had successfully challenged her authority. My fence is still there, a beautiful, shiny monument to what happens when you push a quiet person too far. I get to work on my airstream in total peace, and every time I open my gate with my remote control, I smile. The new HOA board leaves me completely alone. The landscaping company has proper access to do their job, and the neighbors have learned to respect property boundaries. Some people in the neighborhood call it a fence, but I call it my good neighbor policy. It ensures my neighbors stay good by staying off my land. The funny thing is, several neighbors have told me they wish they had the courage to stand up to unreasonable HOA demands the way I did. A few have even asked for my lawyer's contact information for their own property issues. My airstream restoration project is coming along beautifully. I've gutted the interior and I'm rebuilding it with modern amenities while keeping the classic exterior look. It's exactly the kind of project I bought this property to pursue, and now I can work on it without any interference. The HOA learned an expensive lesson about property rights and legal authority. The former president learned that bullying tactics don't work when the other person knows their rights and has the resources to fight back. And I learned that sometimes being the bigger person means building a bigger fence. The best part is that property values in the neighborhood have actually gone up since I installed my fence and gate. Turns out that clearly defined property boundaries and reduced foot traffic make for a more desirable area. Who would have thought that respecting private property rights would be good for everyone involved? I still have my lawyer's contact information saved in my phone, but I haven't needed to use it since this whole situation ended. The new HOA board is professional and reasonable, and they stick to managing actual common areas instead of trying to control private property. It's amazing how much more pleasant neighborhood life can be when everyone stays in their own lane. Looking back, I'm actually grateful this whole thing happened. It forced me to learn about my property rights, connect with a great lawyer, and establish clear boundaries that will protect me for years to come. Plus, I got a really good story out of it that I love telling at dinner parties. There's nothing quite like the look on people's faces when you tell them about the time you locked an HOA out of their own park maintenance by enforcing your property rights. The moral of the story is simple. Know your property boundaries, keep your legal documents handy, and never let anyone bully you into giving up your rights. Sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is to let their own actions create the consequences. In this case, the HOA president's overreach and refusal to acknowledge basic property law ended up costing her organization thousands of dollars and ultimately cost her the position she had abused. I taught them a lesson they won't soon forget, and I definitely came out on top. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I was lurking for some times, and here I am ready to tell my pro-revenge story. To put some context on the story, I was working at a multinational firm. I did my final internship postmaster's degree there, and they liked me, so they offered me a job as a junior consultant. Fresh from school, I couldn't be happier. As I was naive, I signed the contract without worrying about the little details. One of the clauses was that the leave notice is set to be 3 months. I raised the issue and they said, it's not a big deal. It was just for compliance purposes to the parent firm. Fair enough, I started working. In my second month, a colleague screwed up big time. He did something by mistake, jeopardizing one of our biggest accounts. And one of the biggest banks worldwide easily could have made it to the news headlines. They fired the guy and offered me to work on the account. At the time, I had not enough experience to handle working on a team that manages one of our biggest clients, but accepted the offer anyway. I start working with the team located in a different country to work on the international bank, which has branch practically everywhere, so there were a lot of interactions with associates all over the world. They were very happy with my work, and I even had my own team to work for me when I have to multi-account. The manager was very happy with me because I exceeded expectation and I bring more work fees to the firm. While I was waiting for a big raise and bonus in the yearly evaluation, the manager said that I did nothing special. I swallowed my anger and continued to work flawlessly the same as the first year, but with a big duck you attitude. They even gave me other accounts and a team to manage, and because I'm a petty person, I wasn't going to let this slide that easily. The second year evaluation, because of my duck you attitude, they tried to dig dirt on me so they can punish me. They found nothing. The client was very happy with my work. The manager and HR director, HRD, went an extra mile to dig dirt on me from my team. They found nothing. My academic background gave me a lot of tools to work with to manage. I was a good team leader, I trained them well, and I took responsibility for every decision made. On the yearly evaluation, the managing partner, MP, and HRD said that I'm very competent and I did a flawless job, but I wasn't motivated enough to climb the ladder even further this year. The SOB gave me the poorest raise and bonus, even though they have a set of objective rules for that, and the defining factor is the client appreciation, which was excellent for me. The revenge part, it was like the stars were aligning for me. In that big bank account, I was the only remaining from the team, and because it requires a lot of international coordination, not everyone could keep tabs on everything, and there was an account history to keep an eye on. We worked with a lot of high-profile associates around the world, and they are pretty much zero mistake tolerance. As I was the remaining member of the old team, the account associate requested me to come visit him in another country and express to my manager how much he relies on me on the upcoming season. Here comes the fun part. The hot season for work starts from January until late April. With 3-month notice, they hadn't much to worry about, so that's what they thought. Late December, I resigned and demanded to perform only 1 month notice. I know their drill. They'll say they have to consult the MP and they will get back to me with response as soon as possible, but in the meantime, I should train someone to replace me at the end of the month, and once a replacement is trained, they will say he said no, you should stay 3 months or pay up to 2 months. They did this to everyone before me. As I had 1 year to plan my revenge, I set aside my revenge money to take away their leverage. I waited a week and went back to see the HRD. She said she's waiting still for the MP's okay. I went back to my office and I canceled my 5 days paid vacation for the end of December. I had the following conversation by mail. Manager. The flying lag, you can't cancel your paid vacation as there isn't much work to do at that time. You will take paid vacation like everyone else. Me. I won't take it. I'm not like everyone else. I'm on resignation notice, manager. Doesn't matter. You'll take it nevertheless. Me. As stated by labor laws, the employee on resignation notice can't take paid vacation, otherwise it will extend their notice by the said vacation, unless there is an agreement between the two parties on it, which on our case is not. With nothing left to say, she forwarded the mail chain to DHRD and she sent me a mail to come discuss this matter with her. Me. I'm being professional. I demanded my notice reduced and a person to train. 1 week's passed and no replacement, and I'm still waiting for your feedback. HRD. We didn't find the right person to replace you, and we are still looking. Me. I don't care that much. You said in the evaluation I did nothing special, and I haven't what it takes you climb. HRD. Noticed my evil look. Sure, it was brutal how we treated you, but you can't leave. You will stay 3 months, and we have plenty of time to find someone to replace you, and you will train him. Me. That's not going to happen. At the end of the month, I'm leaving, and you can't stop me. HRD. In this case, you pay 2 months' salary, which a lot. Me. No problem. I was prepared for that eventuality. My check is ready. She panicked and she called the manager and the operations director, OD, to the meeting. Them. You can't leave. Even with paying, we have to accept, which won't happen. Me. As stated by law, Section X, Paragraph Y, I can in fact leave and I don't need your approval. The OD is a poker champion and he was in the meeting just to call my bluffs. I leaned on the meeting table to give him enough physical reading of my intention so he can see that I'm not bluffing. I said that I'm leaving at the end the month. You have 2 options. Option 1, I pay you the 2 months, but I will train nobody, or option 2, I'll train somebody to replace me, but I won't pay you. You choose wisely. HRD. This is blackmail. Me. You called it whatever you want. That's my offer. Take it or leave it. You have less than 3 weeks to decide. OD. How we can make sure you will train him well? Me. You don't. If you want the second option, I need a written agreement before I start the training. In the rush, they agree to give up the 2 months' pay in exchange of training someone. They find a junior without any experience to fill for me. I gave her a lousy training, and after 2 months, the client wasn't happy. He dropped our firm. To have some perspective, on the bank account, I alone scored 2,000 hours with hourly fees of $200. They basically give up over $300K annually from that account because they thought it was wise to screw a junior staff on his raise and bonus for 2 years. The next one is a malicious compliance story. In my 20s, I spent a little over 5 years working for an oil and gas well service company. It was a 15 on, 6 off rotation. The first 4 years was at a small shop roughly 7 hours from home, at which point I transferred to a much busier shop that was only a few hours from home. 5 years seems like peanuts in the working world, but in this particular line of work it was a long time. Decent job security as far as oil field work goes, but the pay was marginal at best, so turnover was high. At 5 years, I was the most experienced hand in our shop. The new shop was definitely busier, the money was way better, and I managed to have my days off matched up with a supervisor whose way of doing things meshed perfectly with me. Everything else about the place? Awful. My breaking point was being denied a day off with 2 days' notice to attend a funeral for a good friend who was lost to some health complications after a car accident. I was generally pretty understanding that in our line of work it could be difficult to always balance manpower. But the day I requested off passed with 4 other hands sitting around at the shop doing make-work projects to pass the day. Management couldn't be bothered to take a few minutes to see if they could make things work. It was easier to just say no. To that point in my employment there, I had been extremely flexible with helping out during manpower shortages. I had probably worked in excess of 100 days off and had only ever used 1 sick day. I thought a little reciprocity would have been nice. But I made up my mind. I'd fulfill my obligation to work 1 year at that shop as to not have to pay back the $4,000 transfer bonus I'd received, and then it would be time to move on. I was only a few months off of that 1 year mark, so I started job shopping immediately and quickly set my sights on a mine that we regularly did work for that was close enough to home that I could commute on a daily basis. I made some inquiries with people I knew that were working there, and it seemed right up my alley. Not long after that, I updated my resume and sent it in. A few weeks later, I'm driving back from a job and get a voicemail from HR at the company I applied to. I called back as soon as I had a spare minute and they were looking to have me come in for an interview 2 days later. My heart sank knowing that was going to be a struggle. I talked with the HR lady seeing if they had any other dates available, but it was explained to me that they only arrange 1 interview day once they have enough holes to fill in their crews to justify doing orientation with a group of new hires. She said she could put me as first call for the next round but didn't know when that would be, and she said it would also be fairly short notice. In the end, I agreed to the interview appointment, not knowing how I was going to make it work. I immediately went to the assistant manager to ask for time off as he was looking after dispatching duties that week. I told him something important came up at home that I really need to get dealt with. Without hesitation, he said, "No, we have a full board this week and need you here. Whatever it is, we'll have to wait for your days off." My first thought was that I was just going to call in sick and go to the job interview. The last thing I wanted to do was worry about being fired from a job I no longer want. Then I realized maybe there was another path forward and went to the job board. And there it was, exactly what I needed. A potentially week-long job for the company I was set to interview with, and the job was scheduled to start the next day. And none of the jobs had been assigned to crews yet. I filled my supervisor in with the circumstances and my plan, and he was on board with it. We went to the assistant manager and offered to take that job. He was delighted to have us volunteer as not many crews cared to be away from home for a week, mainly being confined to a rig shack. Day 1 went smoothly, and we were done by early afternoon. I used the supervisor's truck and went home to get some interview-appropriate clothes. Day 2, we were running a bit behind, but we just barely got the job set up and our tools deployed into the well with enough time for me to grab a quick shower and change of clothes before again taking the supervisor's truck over to the administration building for my interview. Got a call the next week with an offer of a start date 2 weeks out. Starting wage was definitely lower than I was making, but they offered clearly defined progression that would have me easily equaling my current income in year 2 and well exceeding it by year 4. Benefits were better, and the schedule would give me twice as much time off. Went to give my manager 2 weeks' notice, and he asked where I was going and what I'd be making. He was appalled I'd leave for such a low starting wage. He asked what it would take to keep me. I told him when a person takes a pay cut to leave, obviously that ship sailed long ago. The next one is an entitled people story. So I work at a call center for a certain members-only bulk store chain, specifically in the online branch. One of the perks we offer our customers is an almost comically lenient return policy. We started limiting certain electronics to 90 days from the date of delivery back in 2016. This will be important later. And our returns team needs to look over and approve any returns for orders over 2 years old, but by and large, we'll accept anything. I like this policy. It's a lot easier for me to just process a return than it is to argue with the customer for 20 minutes about how, no sir, it is not our fault that you didn't think to open the box until well after 90 days and now the computer doesn't work. I can get you over to warranty, but beyond that, my hands are tied. The customers like this policy because it means they basically can return stuff whenever they want within reason. Returns usually approves the 2+ year requests unless it's something egregiously dumb. The key word there is within reason. It's early into my shift. I don't think I'd even had my first break at this point. Phones are dead at this time of day, as is typical once the holiday order rush and the post-holiday return rush subsides, so I'm sitting there trying to figure out what the Duck 71 down on my crossword puzzle is when a call comes through. I snap to attention, give my spiel, and ask what the guy needs. Nobody came to pick up the stove I'm returning. They delivered the new one and took the gas range, but I still have an electric one to return. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I'd be happy to see what's going on. I checked the logistics scheduler. Only return this guy has is for the one that got picked up. I ask if he has the order number for the item being returned. He does not. I pull up his order history and ask him when he ordered the item. For context, the order history we see on our end only goes back to about 2017. I think August of 2013? So it's gonna be one of those calls, huh? I am not looking forward to having to fart around in the DOS system to find this guy's order number, but at this point I'm figuring he just had an old phone number on the order and that's why his pickup isn't in our scheduler with the rest of his orders. After about 20 minutes of checking every single membership number on file in our DOS system, the guy claimed he had never changed his membership number at any point. He was wrong. And multiple assertions of the last people just pulled it right up. Bullcrap. Not only do you not have the order number, but it's tied to your wife's membership number from over 20 years ago and can't even be pulled up with your info at all. Believe me, I ducking tried. I find the order. The return is canceled because our returns team didn't think refunding a 12-year-old stove because it stopped working, after 12 years of no issues with it judging by our records, is in the spirit of our return policy since it's highly unlikely the issue is caused by a manufacturing defect at this point. I could go on about planned obsolescence and how things used to be built to last, but unfortunately 12 years is honestly a pretty hefty shelf life for a home appliance these days, and it's definitely well out of any warranty we have. I explain this to the customer as gingerly as I can, and he demands to know why we didn't tell him this years ago. I'm grandfathered into your 90-day policy, aren't I? When did that change? Why didn't you tell me years ago that you weren't going to accept my return anymore? I need to escalate this right now. I try to explain to him that these sorts of situations are handled on a case-by-case basis, and it's less that there's a hard limit now, and more that a 12-year-old appliance starting to have issues can't really be considered a manufacturer defect that we're obligated to refund you for. He's not having it and asks for a sup. You got it, sir. I kick him over to my supervisor, who also is like, a stove not working after 12 years isn't really something we can blame on the manufacturer. It's not like we sold him a lemon. And move on. But not before he gives me this gem. If I had known you wouldn't accept my return now, I would have returned this years ago. So basically just admitting he wanted us to pay him to haul away his junk rather than actually thinking his stove reaching the end of its lifespan was a manufacturer defect. Dear God, I'm so glad this job pays well. The next one is an entitled parent story. I'm 22 years old and I recently graduated college on May 10th. Right now, I'm trying to figure out my next steps in life, and one of the biggest things I've been seriously considering is moving out of state with my boyfriend. For some background, me and my boyfriend have known each other since we were kids. We grew up around each other, stayed close, and now we're in a real committed relationship. He's 20 and will be 21 in December. We've been talking about leaving Mississippi together to find better jobs and opportunities because honestly, there's just nothing here for us. We want a better life. My parents are Christians, and they have the belief that you shouldn't live with someone unless you're married. So I already know they wouldn't be okay with me moving in with my boyfriend, but it's deeper than that. I haven't told my mom directly that I plan on moving in with him, but I've told her a couple of times that I want to move out on my own. Mostly because of how my dad is. He's always fussing and complaining and talks to me and my siblings like we're still little kids. He's emotionally abusive and extremely judgmental. He constantly asks me when I'm moving out, but I know deep down he'd lose it if he found out I was moving in with my boyfriend. What makes it worse is he still holds a grudge against my boyfriend over something that happened between me and my boyfriend years ago when we were kids. It wasn't anything big or serious, just some small, childish drama that we've long grown past. My boyfriend even apologized for it a long time ago, and we've both matured since then, but my dad acts like it just happened yesterday. He's stuck in the past while we're trying to move forward. He says he doesn't have anything against my boyfriend, but he's never tried to get to know him, never had a conversation with him, and still talks negatively about him or whispers behind my back to my mom. And I hear it too. My room is right by the living room, and sometimes I can hear them whispering about me. My mom ends up telling me what he said, and it always upsets me. What kind of dad does that? My mom, on the other hand, actually likes my boyfriend and has spent time around him, but she guilt trips me every time I bring up leaving. She'll say stuff like, you could get trafficked, someone could shoot into your house, it's dangerous out there, or you're moving somewhere where I don't know anyone. She even says, your cousins will talk about you, like their opinions are more important than my happiness or growth. I feel like she always wants approval from other people. Last year, my boyfriend and his mom invited me on a one-day trip with them, and I made the mistake of asking instead of just telling. When I asked my dad, the first thing he said was, is that boy going? I said yes, and he replied, I don't know about that, and told me and your mom will talk about it. The day before the trip, I asked my mom what they decided, and she said, we don't think you should go. What if y'all get into an accident? I cried and let her guilt trip me into staying home. I missed out on a nice opportunity because they made me feel like I was being irresponsible for simply wanting to enjoy myself. These days, when I want to spend time with my boyfriend, I don't tell them. I usually say I'm going to see his sister since we're close. I hate lying, but I feel like if I told the truth, they'd try to stop me. My mom even asked me if we're having sex, and I always say no, not because I want to lie, but because I don't think it's her place to know. I feel like if I told her the truth, she wouldn't totally judge me, but she'd definitely be upset, maybe even try to limit how often I see him. She's worried I'll end up pregnant, and I understand where she's coming from. She just wants me to be successful and financially stable before starting a family. But still, I want to live and grow and make my own choices. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or rebel against my parents' beliefs. I just want to live my life and finally be happy. With the guilt tripping, the judgment, and the emotional control, I feel trapped. Am I wrong for wanting to move out of state with my boyfriend, especially knowing my parents are Christians and don't believe in living together before marriage? I'd really appreciate advice or support from anyone who's dealt with something like this. Anyway, thank you for watching.